Hello there and welcome back. This is still Hello Nigeria and we're going on to talking to our first guest for today. Now, our first topic for the week is on architecture and structures. To speak to us, we have a consultant architect who has 20 years of experience, over 20 years of experience in the building construction industry, specifically in architecture, project management and construction. He's currently the chairman of the Nigerian Institute of Architects Lagos chapter. He is architect FitzGerald Emeka Umeh. Thank you so much for coming this afternoon. We're delighted to have you on our show.
Good to have you.
Thank you. And I mean, our topic today is structures and architectural designs in Nigeria. Structures in particular, because on the show, a number of times when we do trending stories, we have reported cases and incidences of structures being demolished or structures falling apart and in the process killing a number of people in Nigeria. Now, we've pointed fingers at a number of people. The government for giving the permits in some cases, the contractors for allowing that to happen. But who should really be blamed in situations like that?
Okay, when you talk about structural failures or building collapse, it's a whole lot. It's really a whole lot. But the primary problems when this thing occurs is that when you look down, you realize that most of these projects or these buildings are actually not properly procured. When I mean procured, the people that will need to work on them, like the consultants and all that. You see a couple of clients who encourage quacks. When I mean quacks, people that are not professionals in the building industry. Now, you talked about government, you talked about the consultants, you talked about the contractor. They all have roles to play in this area. Now, when you talk about government, a couple of times, some of these buildings you see really do not have building plan approval. So when you talk about that, you need to talk about corruption. Sometimes, even when these buildings, these drawings are submitted for approvals, a couple of the officers really don't go through to dictate what the structural issues are in those drawings. Now, when you come to the part of the consultant, you see that sometimes when there's negligence in terms of the design, maybe a consultant have actually told the client, we need to do soil tests to determine the bearing capacity of the soil so that we know the type of foundation you're going to say, oh, no, it's a solid ground. We know you've been building here for over 2 years. So sometimes, rather than sticking to what needs to be done, you say, okay, let's just go ahead to do based on previous knowledge. Meanwhile, when it comes to soil, the bearing capacity of soil here can be different from the next, just about 600 mm. So really, when you now come to that of the contractor, contractors oftentimes, a couple of times, they say they really want to, their main business is to make profits. So sometimes some try not to follow the structural design being done by the structural engineer or the consultant. So when you look at it, there are roles, consultants, clients, and the contractor. But basically, for most of the things you hear that actually happens, you realize that the consultants are really, really, really needed. When I mean consultant, the professionals in the built environment are really, really not involved in a couple of these projects. I'll prefer not to mention names, and you know some of the projects we have in Lagos, in Port Harcourt, in Enugu, in Ibadan. These things happen just like on a daily, weekly basis. Not until clients and the government and those who own these properties begin to procure these projects properly. You never get to enter the end. You never get the end of all these things. I have a lot of people claiming to be what they are not. We call them quacks. It's just somebody standing saying, I'm an architect, but when you go down, you just realize that perhaps it's just a draftsman, somebody that has a kiosk, and a couple of things have been happening. So I think basically, if the professionals in the built environment are properly engaged, and I mean properly engaged, things will continue to happen like this. And government need to come in. When I mean they need to come in, the government needs to really enforce a couple of these acts. We have acts by Architect Registration Council of Nigeria. We have acts having Koren. We have different acts which states the role of everybody, those in the building industry. but most of these acts are flaunted, they are not followed, they are not adhered. So it's really, really difficult for us not to have these things happening in the country.
Thank you for mentioning that there are acts that stipulate what everybody's duty and responsibility is. Let's talk about the architect. What is the architect's responsibility? Usually when we hear architect, most people just think, oh, they draw, they do the design, the blueprint of the building. What exactly is the duty of the architect? And, you know, what is the process with regards to, so I have some money today and I decide I want to erect a building. Everybody wants to own a property in Lagos, so I want to have my property. What's the process?
Okay, the Architect Registration Council of Nigeria is specific on the role of the architect in the building industry, in terms of designing, supervision, up to maintenance. You can't just change a wall. You can't even just break or anything. If you go through the acts, the act that stipulates what we need to do, you see that our role is purely defined. The architect is the first port of call when you think about building, because they are the ones that would conceptualize what you want. They are the ones that interpret the brief of the client. You want a 4-bedroom, they ask you questions, check the size of the land you have, advise you if what you're actually requesting for can fit into the site you have. They will also do what we call search to know what the government, the urban planning rule says within that area, what the regulations are. Can you go 7 floors? Can you go 10 floors? Now, when the architect advises you and tells you that this is okay and begins to do your design for you, the next thing is to begin to talk to other consultants, the structural engineer, the mechanical engineer, the electrical engineer, the quantity surveyors, and other professionals.
Who does all this communication? Is it the architect?
It's the architect, because oftentimes he's the first person you meet and he advises you, because beyond the architectural drawings that we do, there's also the structural drawing, which determines the type of foundation you use, the type of beams you use, and all that. So the architect, being the first person you meet, oftentimes advises the client. Or that's why I said properly procuring your project. So once you meet the architect, he would definitely tell you that you need to do all that is in. The architect will not assume the responsibility of a structural engineer or assume the responsibility of an electrical engineer. He will tell you that these are the steps you need to do. And once that is done, you prepare your drawings, he signs off on it, you take it to the planning approval for approval with the laid down rule, because the planning laws are different from state to state. Even in the same state, they are different. The regulations are different in Lagos, in Enugu. Even in Lagos, it's different from VI, it's different from Ikeja. So you as an architect really need to have planning information within that area so that you'll be able to advise your client properly. Because oftentimes, if you don't advise your client properly, you just realize that what you're going to design will not be approvable by the planning authority.
And now, do you organize events from the NIA for architects or people interested in structures and buildings? I believe you have something coming up next month.
Yes, we have the Lagos Architects Forum 9.0 coming up between 9th to 12th of May. It's a public program. It's an international program where we have over 2,000 architects. It's an opportunity for the public to actually know what the role of the architect is, what the role of the other professionals in the built environment do. It's also an opportunity for us to present to present documents to the state governments on what had happened in the last year, what is trending, what they need to do. Last year, we presented a document to the Lagos State government. It's a program that will help the Lagos State government have good planning process to be able to get their revenue as the process is going. Because Lagos State government, or the government generally, loses money when you don't plan, you don't give approvals as at when you're supposed to give it.
So you give advice to the government as well, and then individuals, you basically open up the architectural space to the everyday individual. How can people be a part of this event?
The event is free. Okay. You just go to NIA Lagos website, just Lagos Architects Forum 9.0, just register. It's free when you register online, But if you register at the venue, you have a token to pay. But most times we advise public to register online so that once you just come in, you pick up your tag and come, because you can't come into the fair at a hotel without being fully registered.
All right, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
We're
you
hoping
very
that this year the Nigerian Institute of Architects will put into mind the fact that they can advise the government with regards to creating structures that will improve tourism. We have places like the Eiffel Tower. We'd like to have our own here in Nigeria. So remember to join them for their 9.0 conference coming up soon. Visit the Architects website to get more details. We'll be speaking with architect FitzGerald. Umeh, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To enjoy more of these our Ogbonge videos when you just watch, press this button to subscribe on top of our YouTube page. You go love am.